Hey, and welcome back. So, I just want to start off by thanking those who watched my exit interview, as we're calling it, with myself and Jay, who I can tell you now is he's in Stockholm and he's doing well. And I'm still here in Vancouver. And so, yeah, first off, thanks for those who watched our interview. And in that interview, actually, I didn't include this in the video, but Jay had asked me about my political sort of trajectory. And I didn't include it because I just figured, well, he may be interested in that, but I'm just some guy. And so I won't, bore strangers with that. But understandably, a lot of response I've seen in various corners of the internet to the exit interview has been people questioning how I ever could have supported Donald Trump. I never voted for him. I couldn't. I was never a citizen. Um, but so he asked me about my political trajectory, and apparently people are asking about it. And so I'm going to actually share that video, that portion of our interview here. And in an upcoming video, I'm going to go into more detail about exactly what led me to ever be on Trump's side at all. And so stay tuned for that. And yeah, thanks for watching.
But I thought about pivoting now because your political journey
Mm,
really intrigues me, actually.
mm.
You have an interesting political stripe. Your political evolution is compelling. I'd like to hear you say a few words about how you understand your own political journey, where you have been, where you have gone and ended up now, and everything in between. Do you mind?
Sure. Yeah, so it's tough because I'm sure that you've always been polite about it, but I'm quite reasonably confident I've annoyed you, because I did like Trump, and you were right. So yeah, no, I was happy he won in 16. I wouldn't have voted. I would have stayed home that night, but I was happy he won. And then in 2020, I totally would have voted for him. But then I went the fake elector scheme. I'm done now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like to go back a bit further, like in from like my I went to the University of Toronto and everything, and I was like a young progressive, moderate. Like if 0 is max lefty and 100 is max righty, I would have been somewhere in the low 40s.
This is in your university
Yeah,
studies.
yeah, and all the way up until around 2012 or so. So basically, from like 2001 to 2012, that's where I would have been. I was a huge Young Turks fan.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was a moderate on the left,
Mm.
and then
But not a centrist. I mean, the Young Turks are pretty far left. So you were a moderate progressive. That might be a better way to put it, no?
yeah, you could say that.
Because you weren't a centrist.
No, I think I often tend towards the center, but
Uh,
it's not because I'm conflict averse, quite the opposite.
mhm.
And it's not because I'm just undecided. It's because I tend to see the strength of the arguments of both sides, and I tend to be like, yeah, like I'm on this side, but I get what they're saying, and so that kind of
Mm,
it keeps me from going too far one way or the
right.
other.
But
But
but were you pro-establishment or not so much?
if it's a good establishment, I'm pro.
Right.
But when the establishment starts becoming incredibly top heavy, and like I think the biggest issue in America is the role of money in politics, and and that was and that's I came to that through people like the Young Turks back in
Mm,
like
right.
the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so but what made me flip over
Yes.
was back then from being moderate left to being moderate right was essentially I was not a fan of the social justice warrior movement. I identified as a feminist just purely on the grounds of egalitarianism, and then but I was in the atheist movement where there was this atheism plus kind of movement, which basically was atheism plus social justice, feminism,
Mm,
all that kind
mhm,
of stuff.
mhm,
And initially, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm on your side. I believe in equality. I'm against racism, obviously. But then I would notice on occasion if I would say, well, what about this? And I would make a, just like just a genuine good faith inquiry
mm,
about one of their principles or one of their positions, head bitten right off.
mm,
Like, what
mm,
just happened there? And it kept
mm,
happening over and
mm,
over again. And then I
mm,
started realizing there is a lot of dogmatism on that side, a
mm,
lot, and a lot of the things that like they believe are actually just wrong. like the wage gap, stuff like that, right? Like it is not what they say it is. And really it was people like Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro that were like, they were among the people that were saying, yeah. And I'm like, yes, because so many people on the left were afraid to do it. It's not all. Like people like Sam Harris, pretty moderate, he was. But it's like I started finding, like, I guess during the Bush years,
Mm-hmm.
the left was kind of like the free speech, I think more kind of like culturally libertarian, because the religious right, the moral majority, all that kind of stuff in, like, the 90s, early 2000s. um, I tend not to do well with people that are authoritarian
Mm-hmm.
and like cultural scolds, and so that put me squarely on the left, moderate left, but left nonetheless. And then when the social justice and, like, all that stuff started really getting to the point where it's oppressive, I kind of started feeling more at home on the moderate right.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, I guess I am pretty moderate because I've always been moderate. Like the most I went on the like I went from probably low 40s to being around a 60. So I was never far right. But yeah, like now it's, I guess I've been politically homeless for a long time, and I continue to be.
I like that phrase, politically homeless. I can identify. I want to flesh out a little bit more about that oppressive atmosphere that you experienced on the left. I know you gave the example of there being an intolerance
Mm.
for inquiry and questioning and viewpoint diversity. But can you flesh that out a little more? What would be another example or two that would illustrate this point of intolerance on the left?
Yeah, well, so I first experienced it in the atheist movement. And I would see, for example, in some of our forums and live events, well, just like in our forums, if a creationist or someone came in to one of our, like, our Facebook group and like just put their opinion forward, they would have 8 different atheists picking them apart, up to and including pointing out that they put the comma in the wrong place. They would just dissect them. But then when a feminist would come out and would be making claims no less uh, um, whole laden than the creationist or the homeopath or whatever, like so many people in our community would self neuter. They would just silence themselves. And that was and that could be on a variety of issues. It didn't just have to be about feminism. It could be about indigenous affairs. It could be about race related things, um, any of those kind of hot button subjects. And so that was a big one. And at that moment, there seemed to be a lot more openness to the on the right to free speech, and that's when I ran. But I wasn't naive about it. When I was on the, like, on the left and everything, there were people on the right that were cultural scolds, like people that didn't want Marilyn Manson on the radio, stuff like that, in the 90s and whatnot. And now all of a sudden, people are on the right are being very, very pro free speech, but it's because I think at that moment they were the cultural underdogs. And I wasn't naive. I was like, you know what? I think there's a very real possibility, if not a probability, that the cultural pendulum will swing, and the right will be dominant again. And of the people now on the right that are all pro free speech, pro free speech, pro free speech, a sizable chunk of them will be very happy to shut down others, just as was the case on the left. A lot of them were pro free speech, pro free speech, pro free speech, until the sacred cow was theirs and they had enough power to wield it.
So part of what I'm hearing you say is that on the left, there was not an openness to the idea of multiple causality. Instead, the only potential or the only possible reason for inequality was oppression and discrimination in terms of the wage gap, let's say, and that any other potential causal factor was dismissed out of hand. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there was just like there was not an appetite for that kind of nuance. And there was an incredible readiness to make the worst kinds of assumptions if you didn't fall in line. It wasn't just that you were curious. It wasn't just that you were trying to be intellectually rigorous. There must be an underlying motivation that is driving you to, like, you're masking your sexism with science, or you're masking your racism with statistics. Like, and yeah, there are people that do that. I wasn't one of them. And it's like, but there was no level of me like clarifying that created that clarity. They made their mind up about me, and that was the end of it. And I was seeing it all over the place. And the funny thing too is when this is back in like 2013, this happened on the big scale. Like the atheist debacle happened 2 years before Gamergate, and Gamergate fed into the Trump election.
I don't know what that is.
Gamergate was basically, you know, bickering over feminism and social justice in the gaming industry when it came to things like the gaming press. I'm not a gamer, but I followed the issue because I'm like, oh my god, it's happening again. You know what I mean? It's the same thing, where it's like if you disagree with like this person, you like a female or whatever, you're sexist or whatever, and there was a bunch of corruption in there and whatnot, and if you called it out, you're sexist, and it was very similar. And then that led right in because Milo Yiannopoulos, he was a Gamergate oriented journalist for a while. That was his beat for a bit, and then he went into the whole Trump is daddy thing, and you know it's like it fed right into the Trump election, and so it's like it happened in the atheist community, and it was happening probably in the university community before that. So universities, atheism, gamers, Trump, Clinton, whole world. It was like this recurring fractal pattern that just recurred at increasingly big scales, but it's the same basic process over and over and over again.
So, a whole lot of ad hominem attacks,
Certainly.
a whole lot of not giving you the benefit of the doubt,
Mhm.
not just you, but a lot of people,
Mhm.
a whole lot of intolerance to questioning and viewpoint diversity and considering different causal factors when it
Mhm.
comes to why we don't have equal outcomes.
Mhm.
So, a lot of that then contributed to
Mhm.
you swinging over to the other side. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's not. It was one of those like I didn't leave the left left me kind of situations,
Mm,
because like I still felt like yeah, some of my opinions changed a little bit, but basically I'm the same person.
mm,
But the character of the left had changed. Now though, I see a level of callousness on the right.
mhm,
It is
mhm,
yeah, it's the level of it, like yeah, the level of callous indifference
mhm,
is I'm at a loss for words.
mhm,
And it's not, but I think because the people on the right, they tend to like the whole like Jonathan Haidt, they tend to be more kind of their own local community, their church community, their family, and they'll be anything but callously indifferent to the people in their own community, like
mhm,
the people like, and I don't mean like their own town, like maybe their own town if it's small enough, but like their own church, their own family, their own neighborhood, maybe. But you go beyond that, and the level of caring just falls off a cliff. It would seem,
mhm,
and I shouldn't paint with too broad a brush. There are exceptions to that, but where are the MAGA people calling out what Trump's doing to any other country in the world?
mhm.
I'm seeing a whole lot of indifference.
Yeah, yeah, we're on the same page there. But again, under the rubric of your swing from the left to the right, and what was so off putting, what created that backlash for you, right? For example, where are you on that age old question that's been debated between the left and the right around the extent that there still is discrimination or oppression towards people that are minorities, as opposed to, or put it this way, on the right, it's been argued that those are minor obstacles. In fact, they're impediments, not obstacles. Whereas the people on the left tend to argue that no, they're actually major obstacles. Where do you fall right now on that question?
It's murky, but like certainly sometimes it can absolutely be an obstacle. Like if you're someone who Somalian, like look what's happening with them right now, right? Like if you're new to a country and your English is like 90% of the way there, but not 100% of the way there, and you got an accent and you botch your words sometimes, and you got a funny name, and yeah, like it's probably going to be harder for you. It
Mm-hmm.
will be. So yeah, it's not that there's nothing there. And I never thought there was nothing there. Of course there's something there. I just don't want to another thing that I didn't like about the left was I perceived there to be a heavily um, externalized locus of control when it came to anyone in a minority group. Where it's almost like they would view the straight white man like at the level of like it would seem like it's like you're viewing them as being like almost like superhuman but bad,
Mm-hmm.
and then and then like these minority groups as being
Mm-hmm.
almost like they're somewhere between human and house pet, like like it's they're noble, they're good, but like it's wrong to ask anything of them
Mm-hmm.
beyond having the right opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like that because it's like you could like a social justice warrior type. If you were to say, and I've done this. Okay, I totally grant like racism is a thing and it matters, and I am all about consciousness raising about racism. Totally, I don't want a person's demographics being held against them. But having said that, because I was having a conversation with some old high school friends about the Black Lives Matter stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked them, okay, so I grant that we are on the same page,
Mm-hmm.
but can I just ask you, like, what is some things that Black people can do as individuals, families, communities to help themselves, other than protesting, right? And I'm not saying that's all there is to it, but like that has to be part of it because ultimately, I don't think anyone can advocate for you and your family as well as you and your family can, and they refused to answer the question. I asked them 4 or 5 times, and they dodged. They never did. They never answered it. But if I had asked them, like, what are some things that white people could do, I have no doubt they could have rattled off 8 different things I've been trying. Oh, they could read Black literature, they could listen more and talk less. They could take some gender studies classes. They could donate to BLM. They could go to some protests. It's not that hard, right? But what's one thing, and it's like the thing is like I could offer suggestions, and it's like, but the suggestions I would offer are the exact suggestions I would have offered to anybody. So for example, I didn't have a good father. I know directly the pain of that, and the consequences of that are bad, right? That is more common in Black communities. That would be something that would help. I'm not saying that racism is all of a sudden not a thing anymore and we shouldn't deal with those. Of course we should, but I don't want to just look at half the ledger.
Yeah, yeah. And a few words
Yeah.
about the people that see patriarchy as a major issue. A few words.
I think it's grotesquely overblown. Males and females are not like white people and indigenous people or white people and black people. It is entirely possible, and in fact, historically, it was usual to never have a person of a different race in your family that you cared about. If you're a man, you had a mom. If you're a girl, you had a dad. You might not have met him, but yeah, yeah, but no, but you know what I mean, right? Like we have these bonds to each other, and so I don't like the idea of treating sexism and like gender stuff as if it was like race. It's a very different thing. Are there more men on the top? Yes, but there are also more men on the bottom. Are there more men on the top? Yes, but men also have a bigger incentive to go up high and they pay a bigger price to go down low. Like if a man moves up the social hierarchy in terms of like job status, income, their romantic opportunities will increase. Their status among other males will increase. If he like goes down the scale, he'll pay a big price. If Whereas it's not as much like a woman. It's like as a woman goes up the strata of like earnings, her dating pool in many ways gets smaller. You know what I mean? Because like women tend to date across and up, and other men might be intimidated by her because they know that other women tend to date across and up, and so she might not like the guy because he's lacking confidence, right? Like so she's gonna pay like yeah she'll have more money and all that stuff and more achievement, all that, and that's great, but there will the benefits will be smaller and the costs will be bigger. And meanwhile, if she doesn't make that much money, the costs are smaller in terms of dating. Like you're going to see more male doctors dating female secretaries than you're going to see female doctors dating men who work at Verizon or something. And so, yeah.
Say a little bit more about how you see men sometimes in certain contexts getting the shorter end of the stick.
Yeah, that happens. So men are expected to be competent and confident and strong within themselves, and that can afford a lot of opportunities for men. Like men might be viewed as more just like as a default setting. Some people might view men as being more leadership ready, all right, for those kinds of things. However, if a man lacks those abilities, he pays a much bigger price. Likewise, like if a man sucks at if a boy is bad at sports in gym class,
it can be very embarrassing. If a girl's bad at sports, I don't think they pay much of a price for that.
Mm.
And so it kind of depends on, like, if you are a man who is timid, you probably would have been better off being a female in terms of the social consequences of that.
Mm.
And if you are a female who is highly ambitious career wise, you might have been better off being a male. Not necessarily, but maybe, right? In some cases, yes,
Mm.
certainly. It's a mixed bag. There are benefits to being male and there are benefits to being female. And there are drawbacks to being male and there are drawbacks to being female. But the benefits and the drawbacks are not equally shared. Some men are absolutely thrive because their nature is highly correspondent to what is rewarded in men. And some females, same thing. They thrive because
Mm.
just the way they're built psychologically, physically, and so forth, it's just the world loves that in females.
Yeah.
And some just get beaten the crap out of, not physically, although sometimes. But and most of us, I think, are generally speaking a little better, are better off than we would have been otherwise, because otherwise the culture would change.
Mm. Well. What do you think about how women are trouncing men when it comes to higher education graduation rates?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's probably lots of reasons for that. I've heard the speculations like boisterousness in classrooms tends to be discouraged because, and you're going to have that in class as the classroom sizes get bigger. The teacher
Mm.
needs to be able to have order in the class, and so the boys might kind of are more likely to be boisterous and they'll
Mm.
get shut down
Mm.
more, and that might make them less comfortable in an academic setting. That might be
Mm.
one thing. There could be a lot of factors. Maybe there's more
Mm.
female young teachers. That could be a thing.
But I mean, in certain regards, men seem to suffer in ways that women don't. For example, their rates of suicide
Mhm.
far outpace that of the women's.
Yeah. So, well, with I think women attempt as much or more than men.
Mm.
Just men get it done.
Mm.
No, but that's actually a thing though, right? Women I think attempt more, but men succeed more because we tend to use more lethal means. But yeah, so there's lots of ways that men will suffer more, and part of it's because we're not allowed to show weakness as much, so that's a problem, and so there's more suffering in silence, and when we suffer publicly, it'll get rewarded less and punished more.
Mm.
So that's something. Another thing too that men suffer from is that a lot of the career opportunities, work opportunities that were gainful are gone. They've either been teched out or outsourced out. And so
Mm.
if you are a man that is more brawny than you are brainy, or you just have or more of a kind of an aptitude for like kind of more traditional kind of things, well, a lot of that's been teched out or shipped out,
Mm.
and so now you've lost a lot of work opportunity,
Mm.
and we're moving more towards sort of like a cognitive economy, and yeah, so it's like if like of the men that would have been who are more physically oriented, the jobs are fewer, the pay might be lower because they're like it's harder to unionize when your company might outsource to Mexico if you don't knock off the unionization talk. And so now your wages get suppressed, and then it's like it's kind of harder to support a family and blah 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 blah, all that kind of
Mm.
stuff.
Mhm. Mhm. But in terms of your political locale, do you believe that women should have the right to vote and have economic freedom?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, yeah, that's yeah, not even a question.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's about equal opportunity,
right.
but trying to engineer equal outcomes. Say a few
Yeah.
words about that.
Yeah, no, I'm all about equal opportunity and I'm all about encouragement and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think we should assume that if we get this unequal outcomes,
Mm.
that it's necessarily evidence of something corrupt or malicious is happening. The research on this is pretty clear in the psychological and social sciences. Males on average tend to be more interested in physical type things, and female more in social type things. So there's more female nurses and more male engineers and so
Mm.
forth.
Mhm.
And so like no matter how hard you try, I
Mhm.
don't think you're going to get this perfect equality. It doesn't necessarily mean something nefarious is happening.
Mhm.
I'm not saying we shut off our eyes and pretend that it's definitely not, but I'm
Mm.
not saying that I don't think we should just assume there is.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. Didn't they try to get that kind of equality in Sweden and it didn't work out very well? What do you know about that?
Well, so I haven't read the research myself, but I've heard about this. But I've heard that it actually kind of almost backfired. Like if you want to view it that way, like it's because like Sweden, Norway, they're the most like kind of gender egalitarian countries on earth. I think,
Yep.
literally, and am this like females are even more likely to be nurses there and work in like early childhood education and things like that, and men are even more likely to be engineers there. And
Right.
it's like, man, like if you want to see the women in tech, you need to go to the progressive mecca of Iran.
That's a good one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think the way you pontificate and opine about these things is really interesting. You're very articulate around these things, and you have a lot of good things to say. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good.